Okay, it's time for a new chapter, chapter 14. The title of this chapter is going to be Partial Derivatives. And so we won't be doing the partial derivatives section until section 14.3. The first couple of sections will build up to section 14.3, and then later on, 14.4 and following, we'll be doing lots of applications of partial derivatives. Before we get to partial derivatives, you're going to start off in section 14.1, functions of several variables. And so I just wanted to spend this video just kind of doing intro to what this section and, in fact, most of this chapter is going to be about. So in Calc 1, we had functions with one input and one output. So, for example, we might have had f of x is x squared plus 3x plus 1. So, for example, f of 2 would be 2 squared is 4 plus 3 times 2 is 10, 11 here. So, one input, one output. Our function, you put in one number, 2, you get out one number, 11. In chapter 13, we saw more complicated kinds of functions where we would have like one input and 2 or 3 outputs. So as an example of that, we'd have these vector valued functions. R of t is going to be t squared plus 1 e to the t. So r of 1 would be 1. 1 squared plus 1 is 2, and e. So you can think of the vector as a single object. Vector is a single object, so you could still say it's one input, one output, the vector. But I think it's a little bit useful to have a just different lens on it and say we input one thing into our function, the number 1 here, t is 1, and then we output 3 different things here. A first component, a second component, a third component. So this is, Calc 1 and everything you've kind of done up in your mathematical life up to that point. Chapter 13 is a new way of thinking about things. Well, guess what? We're going to have yet another way of thinking about these things. Now our functions are going to have 2 or 3 inputs and 1 output. So, for example, let me go to a new slide here. We might have f of xy is equal to x squared y minus e to the xy plus 3y squared. So this is a function of 2 variables we're going to be dealing with as the section title promised, functions of several variables. This is a function of 2 variables. And so we're going to give it 2 inputs. We're going to give it x is 0 and y is 1. And so we give it x is 0 and y is 1. We end up with 0 squared times 1 minus e to the 0 times 1 plus 3 times 1 squared. And this ends up as 2 when you simplify this. So this function, it inputs 2 numbers, x and y, 0 and 1 in this case, and it gives you 1 output, the number 2. By the way, if you can, let me just kind of give a look ahead to later in this course. If you can spot what we did in chapter 13, spot what we did now, think of that to kind of suggest what we might be doing around chapter 16 or thereabouts. Just saying. Okay, so that was a function of 2 variables. Function of 3 variables would be very easy to write down. F of x, y, z, x plus y plus z minus x, y, e to the z. And of course, you can just plug in for x, y, and z. There's nothing magical here about x, y, and z. We can have a function in terms of r, s, and t, for instance. And then maybe one more thing that is worth saying. Sometimes in this chapter, I like to, pull out examples from, the physics and the chemistry classes I remember from in high school and in first year or so of undergrad. So PV equals nRT. My wife, she's a chemist. She'll be very happy to know that I'm throwing this in here. PV equals nRT. This is the ideal gas law. And so in the ideal gas law, for those who aren't familiar, you just need a reminder, these are constants in general for a given problem. And so P stands for pressure, V stands for volume, T stands for temperature. And so what we can do is that we can rearrange P to equal nRT over V here. Again, N and R are some constants here. T is temperature, V is volume. So we can think of pressure, P, as a function of volume and temperature here. That's given by this relation here. So a lot of physics and chemistry laws, a lot of physics, chemistry rules can be expressed as functions of two or more variables. Okay, so I think that's a good intro to what we'll be doing in this section, in this chapter. We'll be doing a lot more stuff in future videos.